I'll show you 3 key games today to highlight how key chess positional patterns are used over and over again by different players, and why knowing those patterns is a crucial advantage in chess. King's Indian players, Benoni players, you will love this episode. First game, and historically the earliest game that highlight this key point, is a game between Kotov and Gligoric in Zurich 1953. As some of you already know, I got better in chess by reading chess books, and Zurich 1953 was one of the first books that I read. I was very inspired by this game. I still remember the day I was reading this game. I was following the moves, the annotations by Bronstein that really had a huge impact on me. Please watch carefully, folks, while I am navigating you through the key pattern. King's Indian defense so far as black, right? We got this King's Indian pawn formation. The bishop is here, and white has more space in the center of the board by going d5. And here, Gligoric went c5. One of those ideas in the King's Indian, the pawn reaches c5 and controls this d4 square, okay? Bishop d3 by Kotov, knight h5. Black is preparing the break f5. Typical King's Indian pawn break f5 will ensue, folks. Here we go. f5 is on the board. Takes. And here we reach a critical moment. Please stop the video and think for yourself. How would you treat this position with the black pieces? And remember, I was deeply inspired by this positional operation by Grigoric here. This is the key position that will highlight our lesson, folks. Now, you're a great player if you found Gligoric's plan of starting with the push e4 first. Typical Benoni pawn break e4, it's a positional pawn sacrifice. The first point is so visible. You're awakening your terrible King's Indian bishop in this case. What else? After f takes e4, which is forced, what is the right follow-up, folks? Tell me, please. Yes, the right follow-up is the move f4, because you want to keep the e4 pawn on the board, because the e4 pawn is blunting the white pieces. You attack the bishop. This comes with tempo as well. Moreover, after the bishop moves, look, you just created this e5 outpost for your pieces, and now the knight is simply heading to e5. Please take a step back and understand why black sacrificed the pawn for this typical operation. Going back again, folks, this now became a standard Benoni pawn break. e4, follow it up with f4 by black, and now those pieces are blunted, and you got yourself a beautiful e5 outpost for your knight, folks. If black didn't play this way, let's say you make a normal move like a6, maybe preparing b5, white had a very good move, knight g3, intensifying the grip on this f5 pawn, also hitting your knight on h5. If you ever take that knight, then the rook is activating, they will castle long, and they're having happy pieces, maybe even g4 to follow to activate their pieces, and so on, right? This is actually a better position for white. So black understands the criticalness of the situation, and they execute the typical plan of e4. Of course, if you rush with f4, you lose h7 with a check, follow it up with, let's say, bishop f2, and on top of you losing a pawn, you also gave white a clear outpost on e4 that their pieces will use. Your bishop is crying. Your knight has no access to e5 as well. Please compare and contrast this position, positionally speaking, with the game continuation, right? Starting with e4 is giving you all the advantages, namely happy bishop, happy knight, plus you blunt the white pieces. Even this knight cannot use the e4 outpost because there's a pawn blocking that outpost, right? Once I break it down to you like this, you understand the strength of this mini plan. By the way, it's a standard 3-ply mini plan, right? This is not like deep calculation. This is about knowledge of these key positional chunks in chess. That's it. You can basically stop your calculation here, and suddenly, despite being a pawn down, black has the advantage, simply because of positional reasons. That's exactly why Kotov wants to play the move knight f3 to fight against the knight e5 ideas. White has to be so careful. Queen g5 attacks g2. Bishop f1 is more or less forced to defend the pawn, and now knight e5. Please, folks, every single piece is activating in the process. black is simply better despite being a pawn down. Very quickly, I will show you the game because we already reached the key moment. Just to show you the long-term nature of black's advantage, blockade on e5, strong outpost on e5 remains for black, right? Those beautiful pieces looking at the queen side. Now, after castle long, the game has become much sharper with king's castle on opposite flanks. And again, black keeps the advantage, folks. h3, stopping knight g4, bishop b7, preparing a simple pawn storm of a6, followed up with b5, folks. Black's plan is indeed very simple. b5, open up lines, attack against the white king in this process. Knight b1 is a very good move because they want to, let's say, move the knight to f3 to attack the queen and remove their beautiful piece from e5, right? It's very difficult for white to deal with black's pieces, maybe even eyeing those ideas. White has to be so careful to defend this position. But here comes the second positional pawn sacrifice by Gligoric. I was so impressed as well because by playing f3, he's stopping the knight appearing on f3 because now there's another pawn that is blocking that knight's access. And of course, knight h5 is the right follow-up, activating the rook. Also, looking at this beautiful outpost on f4 for his knight. Amazing, right? Amazing, interesting move. Knight d2, knight f4, black sacrificed 2 pawns, but here they are completely equal according to Stockfish in this position. Bishop a4 was a great move here because if you take my bishop, then comes checkmate, queen takes b2. So bishop a4, well, knight b3 is more or less the only move. And then black is still having an okay game in this process. But after bishop f1, Grigoric also played a very logical move b5. He simply wants to open up lines in the process. We can stop here already. Black is down 2 pawns, but has enough compensation for those 2 pawns purely because of their beautiful piece activity. Also, the rooks are coming here to attack the white king. Please see how the e4 pawn is blunting the white pieces. They have terrible bishop on f1 and so on and so on. It's all because of the critical, typical pawn break e4 followed up with f4, a typical positional pawn sacrifice. Now you learned an important positional chunk. As I said, King's Indian players, Benoni players, you should know such positional mini plans and strategic patterns. Now we follow this with another game. Botvinnik versus Pomar in 1962. 9 years after the game was played between Kotov and Gligoric, Botvinnik is facing Pomar, okay, in the Olympiad in Varna in 1962. Botvinnik, interestingly, he starts with the King's Indian attack, right? King's Indian defense with reversed colors. We will soon see how we reach a very similar position. e4, d4, now he will go c4. Remember, just like in last example, Botvinnik achieves this pawn formation. Yes, black has more space in the center of the board, but white has later plans of playing f4 and attack the king side in this process. Typical, right? Knight h4 prepares the f4 plan, and now after f4, takes, queen c7. Do you remember, folks? Does this position remind you something? Well, it's more or less the same position we looked at. So white to play and find the only winning move here. Yes, you didn't hear me wrong. White has a winning advantage already if they find the right mini plan here. And you're a great player if you found the plan of e5, just like in last example, forcing f takes e5. What's the follow-up? Bam! f5 is the right follow-up. Gaining tempo on the bishop, blunting this bishop because of the pawn on e5, activating your King's Indian bishop, plus gaining the e4 outpost for your knight. Can you see the beauty of this, folks? It's all about piece activity. Indeed, that will be the main conclusion of this lesson. How pawn breaks and pawn play connects to piece activity in chess. The bishop is happy, the knight is happy, this bishop is sad, this knight is also sad because they can't use the e5 outpost. And now after bishop f7, Botvinnik. Well, he played a very natural knight e4, but he let the advantage sort of slip because they let the black king to go to queen side in this process. The best move for white was a beautiful move, queen g4. Well, simply stopping the black king from castling long, because if they do so, comes f6 check, followed up with f takes e7, and white wins a piece in the process. Queen g4 was a beautiful move order. This move should be played first, so you stop this move. Also eyeing the g7 point, if they ever castle short, folks. Then comes knight e4, followed up with bishop h6, followed up maybe with d6. This game is completely finished. White is clearly winning in this position. They can't castle short, but then after rook c8, let's say, now you go knight e4, and you achieved a very, very similar position with a much better circumstances because black king is stuck in the center as well on top of black's miserable pieces. Please look at those miserable pieces, folks. It all boils down to piece activity difference. Please understand the strength of this very typical positional pawn sacrifice, typical break, e5, followed up with f5, just like Kotov Gligoric. Botvinnik executes the same idea with the white pieces. Again, knowledge is huge in chess. Knowing those patterns and chunks, storing them in your long-term memories is a huge advantage in chess, and that's what we are doing with those rich and instructive puzzles. In the actual game, Botvinnik played the move knight e4 first, queen g4 later, and yet black had some compensation because right now the game is very sharp and their pieces soon arrive to the g file, and they actually create some counterplay that Botvinnik had to be careful to parry. Right, queen f6 is the only move to keep some advantage, but black played very nicely in this position, guarding the bishop. The queen is sort of misplaced on f6, and with careful play, black managed to get an even a little better position here. Queen f5, bishop h4. Black is certainly better in this position, folks, after knight e7. But Botvinnik, being Botvinnik, he played very good chess here. And black made a huge mistake in his position. After rook f1, they make a huge mistake with rook knight f4, folks. Please stop the video, white to play and win. And you're a great player if you found Botvinnik's idea. Exchange sacrifice, follow with bishop takes f4. And black resigned because after king a8 comes queen c8, checkmate. Can you see it? That's why knight f4 was a huge blunder, because they allowed this exchange sacrifice. Their king is exposed. Well, there is no interposing defense either, and now they just resigned. Let's finish this. The recent example from 2019, a game between Lindgren and Parvanyan. Well, they're both very good players. This is from Bundesliga. Both players are international masters, by the way, folks. Please, it again starts from a King's Indian formation, and black will soon play e5 and c5. Now they start with c5 first. That's also a typical idea, of course, in the King's Indians. d5, e5. You see, we reach a very similar pawn formation here. Knight h5, black is preparing f5 break. You see how those ideas are used and reused over and over again. Queen c2, it's your turn, folks. Black to play. Please find that beautiful resource. Bam! e4 is the correct move. After takes, bam, f4 is the right follow-up. Again, hitting the bishop, activating this guy, creating knight e5 ideas. Just like Kotov Gligoric, black is playing well. Just like they are following Kotov Gligoric, folks. Queen g5, bishop f1, so far so good. Here, black deviates from Kotov Gligoric game. They play the move queen h6 in this game. After knight f3, black chooses knight g3. This was the basic point of the move queen h6, aligning with the rook on h1. After rook g1, black simply captures the bishop on f1 in the process, folks. The idea of this exchange is that this knight wasn't doing much on this h5 square, and this bishop might later serve some function. So I guess that was the basic point of black's taking on f1, and now they activate their bishop as well. They are keeping full blockade and control on this key e5 square, and after this, black played the move bishop g4, pinning that knight. Castle long. This game will be very, very sharp, folks, right? And now comes my question. How does black prepare the pawn storm on the queen side? And you're a great player if you want a very simple move a6. They want to follow it up with the move b5, typical pawn break to open up lines on the queen side. Practically, also objectively, black stands better despite black being a pawn down in this position, folks. It's all about white's lack of piece activity and beautiful domination on a5. Excellent bishop on g7 as well. They preserve the pin with the move bishop h5, folks. Bishop e1, b5 is on the board again. Pawn break d5. They're opening up lines on the queen side. In the actual game, white took twice, but despite having two extra pawns, their queen is attacked by the rooks. This is what compensation looks like, right? In some sense, these pawns were just piece of wood getting in the way of the black rooks, and that's why black sacrificed that pawn. Beautiful coordination, beautiful piece play. You see exactly why. Machine is giving almost -2 advantage to black in this position. It's a joy to play these positions, folks. Rook b4, beautiful move, eyeing those key squares, sometimes preparing rook b8 ideas to intensify the pressure on the pawn on b2. a3, newly weakness on b3. Rook b3 is on the board. Again, black is so much better here, folks. Rook b8, attacking b2, simple chess. Simple chess looks like this. c4, well, black wants to create an outpost for the knight. They are soon creating an octopus knight on d3, right? Step by step, black's piece activity intensifies. Knight d3 is on the board, folks. Comes with a huge threat of rook takes b2 in the process. Thus, white cannot take on h5. They played the move knight d1, very passive move, just to be able to guard the pawn on b2. Simply bishop e8. The bishop is now eyeing this a4 point. Folks, you see it, right? You see what compensation looks like. Beautiful black pieces. Please, folks, despite the queen, except the queen, well, queen is the worst placed piece, let's say. Every single black piece is beautiful. In the end, they might not even need the queen to finish off this game indeed. Knight d2 was chosen. Here, black also activate their queen with another beautiful positional pawn sacrifice, f3, clearing the diagonal for the queen. Isn't it beautiful? Also attacking the queen on e2. Thus, white must react to this move. And now, after being 3 pawns down, black activates the bishop. And now every single black piece is beautiful, right? So when you see games like this, it must have some impact on you, right? Black is currently down 3 pawns, but who cares? King safety and piece activity is much more important than material in chess. And it just looks like this exactly. Please look at every single white piece. Terribly tied down, right? And here black is already winning. Indeed, mate in 7 by force. Well, in the actual game, they took on b3. Maybe they are gentlemen. They allowed their opponents to checkmate them with the move bishop takes b3. And that's checkmate indeed, folks. That's checkmate indeed. What a beautiful checkmate this is, right? What a beautiful harmony this is. Every single black piece is involved in its final mating picture. Once again, folks, see how black's pawn play connected to piece activity in this game. He refused to passively defend their pawns like this, and he took the first opportunity to activate them. Again, same old wine in different bottles, over and over again, right? e4, typical Benoni pawn break. f4 is the right follow-up. You see the entire point. It makes logical sense, right? Those pieces are blunted. They can't use e4, but black bishop is beautiful, and it's coming to e5 this night. It's as simple as that. It connects to piece activity, right? How do you judge those pawn moves? If several of my pieces are getting happy, and if the same move is paralyzing and dominating the enemy pieces, then it's usually a great pawn move in chess. One of those cases, right? And how, again, black never shied away from making another pawn sacrifice, right? This, I think, is much easier, by the way, because you look at the king's locations, it's understandable. That's a pawn storm position. The rooks want open files. Thus, you play the move b5 without much calculation, right? You don't need crazy amount of calculation here. If knight takes b5, at the very least, you take on a2. That's beautiful. And after queen takes b5, game continuation. Thank you so much, right? The rook is getting the open file, and you take it from there. You don't need to calculate 25 moves before understanding that b5 is the correct move here, right? And once black reaches position, they didn't rush. They simply continued improving step by step. They understood white has no counterplay whatsoever. Simple chess, right? Simply improving the worst place piece, improving the knight even further with the move like knight d3. Amazingly beautiful, right? Also activating the bishop in the process. And now final piece joins the game as well. So beautiful. And they don't forget about their final piece. The queen also got involved in the attack with another pawn sacrifice, f3. Beautiful, guys. I love such games. I simply love such games. And again, white was a gentleman player playing for my club in Malmö. He's a great guy. And he allowed his opponent to checkmate him after this beautiful game. Now you learn the crucial chess pattern. There is high chance of applicants in those openings. You can even apply the same idea to different pawn structures involving similar activation and deactivation processes. So I'm sure this will help you at some point in your chess journey. Please ask me anything on YouTube. I will respond to each and every one of you. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe, share with your friends so I can keep on producing instructive content that actually helps you